Welcome to the Core Experience, your connection to community, business, and the people who make it all happen with your host, Brandon Suba.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Core Experience. I'm Brandon Suba, a Treasury Relationship Manager at Core Bank. But today, I'm going to be your host on the Core Experience. And I think it's been a while since I've promoted this, but you can listen and watch the Core Experience. You can listen to it. Probably you are doing that right now on any of your preferred podcast streaming services. But then we also, on the Core Bank YouTube page, push out the little video so you can see the guests that we have, and you can see how animated I am, even though these should just be audio, because I tend to talk with my hands. And Brandy over here, she's waving to the camera and everything.
I do too.
You just look all natural in this whole situation. So we have guests of employees at the bank, and we talk about products and everything. But I will say my favorite are when we get to bring in our nonprofits that we get to support and be part of. And today we have Brandy Wallar with us, and she is with New Vision Homeless Services, and you are the CEO there. They received the Community Impact Award from Core Bank back in July 2024, and that's a financial gift, and that has provided equipment and enhanced their employment and education program. They're a member of the Nonprofit Association of the Midlands, United Way of the Midlands, and have a gold seal of transparency through GuideStar, which I don't know exactly what that is, but I'm happy that a nonprofit gets things like that.
It's a good thing to have.
It is. Yes. It absolutely is. I think it's even better than the Business Bureau, if you want my opinion. So, Brandy, welcome to the Core Experience.
Thank you for having me. I'm super excited to be here.
Well, from the second you walked into the studio, I felt our personalities were going to work out just fine on the podcast.
I think we'll do okay today.
All right. We'll try to keep the audience entertained.
Okay.
Well, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got started with New Vision Homeless Services.
Yeah, so I was actually born and raised in Council Bluffs. My mom had 4 kids by the time she was 20, so a young mom. My dad just actually left. So growing up, I knew what it was like to live in poverty, hunger, addiction, different levels of homelessness, but I really didn't know how that would affect me till later. So I was very fortunate. So I had a full ride scholarship actually to go to University of Iowa to be a nurse.
Wow.
But I find out that I pass out when I see blood, which was a problem.
I can't watch Grey's Anatomy.
I can't either.
Okay.
No, I can't even hear bones breaking.
Yes.
So I switched last second to Iowa State University, got my undergrad in social work. And so I was raised a Hawkeye, went to Iowa State and married a huge Husker fan. So football Saturday is fun for me.
I don't know, this year might be a little different.
Yeah.
Just saying.
Yeah.
But the last few years have to be very enjoyable.
Yes, they have not. But my son was like, this is the Husker team Dad's always talked about. So we're excited for that. So I ended up moving back to this area after I got my undergrad, and I was a broke college student, so I started waiting tables, but it wasn't filling my cup. So I got a part-time job in homeless shelters, working with families and children after school programming. And it was so crazy because these families were my family, and I didn't realize it, because a lot of times when we think about homelessness, we think about the single man under the bridge, that's drinking. And I seen all of these families, and I just kind of fell in love with the population, which led me to applying for a homeless outreach position back in 2003. So I've been doing this work for 21 years now.
Amazing.
Yep. And so I had an opportunity. My office was in 4 different nonprofits, one of them being New Vision Homeless Services. Okay. And so I started working out of there, working with individuals experiencing street-level homelessness. Our founder, which his name is Reverend Harry Wallar, which I share the last name with. I did not marry the founder, but I met his son, and that his son was pretty darn handsome. And so when people ask me where I met my husband, and I tell them in a homeless shelter, they either have a lot of questions or no questions at all. They just skip right over that part. And so, so that's kind of what started my journey. Since then, I've been part of the organizational's growth. When I started, we were just a meal site under the VIDOC. But we actually are a grassroots organization. And so our founder was a service-connected disabled veteran. And again, he had some trauma in his life. His dad was a Marine, served in the Korean War. He was a Marine his whole life. He was going to be a Marine, went in and blew out his knee within a couple of years of being there. So he found himself back in Omaha as a young man questioning, what's my next step? So his dad, like I said, was a Korean War veteran. And unfortunately, we didn't talk a lot back then in the 70s and 80s about PTSD. Oh. And so his dad got shot in the Korean War, healed physically but not mentally, and then came back and became an Omaha police officer right away. So here's our founder coming back, really spiraling, like, what do I do now? And within a year, his dad took his own life with his service pistol, and our founder found him.
Wow.
Yeah, which led into a spiral of addiction, in and out of jail. He ended up finding a community of supporters, got clean and sober in his 30s. Came over to Council Bluffs, worked at Children's Square, which was equivalent to like Boys Town.
Okay.
So worked with children, and he started a small church, and he was on his way to church one day, and a family stopped him and said, "Sir, we're hungry. We don't have any money." And this was in the mid-90s, to feed our children. And I always tell people, I said, to do amazing things for your community, what do you have? Because so many times we think, well, when I'm retired, or I have all this money, or my kids are out of the house. And he didn't do that day. He said, well, he emptied his pockets and gave it to that family, and he went to his church, and he said, "Church, we're going to start feeding hungry people." And his wife was like, "Hold the bus." We're struggling to feed our own family. Yep. But what do you have? He was able to make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, put an apple and a bottle of water in it. And the next week they went out and started feeding hungry people. So that's how we started, was with the peanut butter and jelly sandwich. So I always challenge people, if you can make a peanut butter and jelly sandwich, you could start a nonprofit.
Wow.
Yeah.
So really boots on the ground.
Boots on the ground.
And, I've got the honor to talk to many nonprofits here locally, but between Omaha and Council Bluffs. And the stories coming into it are always awesome. Yep. Because, I don't know, there's a lot of businesses out there that maybe it wasn't the hardships that got them here. Yeah. It was, they worked hard, don't get me wrong, right?
100%.
But to hear when a nonprofit, because it's in the name, nonprofit,
yep.
You're definitely more focused on serving people 100%. Than you are serving yourself.
Yep.
And I think the story of how this started is the epitome of serving others versus yourself.
Yeah.
So where are you guys located? We've mentioned Council Bluffs.
Yeah. So we started in Council Bluffs, and we grew. So we started, again, by a little white van, sack lunches. Then that continued. I always say hunger never goes away. So in the heat and the cold, there would be women with their children out there saying, "Sir, can we get several sack lunches?" So his church grew a little bit, and he played the same game, and he said, "Hey, we're going to get a bus." And then people could come out of the cold and get a hot meal. And within 1 week, he had a bus donated to him. And so I always say, and this was in like 1996 or 97. So we were like the OG of food trucks in Council Bluffs and Omaha.
Yeah.
So because the health department didn't even know how to label us, because there was no real acting food trucks. And so I got free tacos one time out of it. I'm like, "Hey, you're welcome," So we started that, and then we got an old hardware building under the Vidoc in Council Bluffs. And that's where we had a meal site where people could actually come inside. And that's where I came on the scene. And then in 2006, we opened our first campus in Council Bluffs because a lot of people coming to our meal site, there was nowhere in all of Western Iowa that had a single men's shelter. So a lot of people that would kind of hang out throughout the day, and that's why they brought me on, were people experiencing homelessness, and especially men. And so we built our first campus in Council Bluffs off of 15th and Avenue N, and that one has our low barrier men's shelter. So we sleep about anywhere between 105 and 120 men a night. It's important to stress the low barrier. All of our programs are low barrier. I always say it's a chemical, not character. If you and I left right now and had nowhere to go, everything we owned was on the street, we didn't have access to phone, transportation, we wouldn't be showing up all happy-go-lucky today.
Right.
We would have a lot of things, and we've all been everybody listening to this is a human, and we've all humaned, and we've all had really hard days, and so a lot of times we don't show up the best in those hard days. We don't, because we're in survival. So low barrier means we take people just as they are.
Cool.
Of course, they can't bring drugs or alcohol on our campus, but if they're struggling with that, we want to be the access to hope. And so I always liken it to, like, you could have the best hospital in your community, but if you have leukemia and I look at you and say, "Hey, heal yourself first of leukemia, and then then you could come in. It makes no sense. So we have a low barrier homeless men's shelter. We still have our food security programs. We haven't missed serving a meal in over 30 years since that first peanut butter and jelly sandwich. We have permanent supportive housing because the only solution to homelessness is housing. That's it. Now, people do need wraparound services if they're struggling with mental health, substance abuse, poverty. They need wraparound. But how we're going to end homelessness is by providing housing for them. So we have permanent supportive housing. We have prevention, which is one of my favorite programs because it stops people from being homeless. So we pay people's eviction notices, first month's rent, deposit. If somebody comes to me and has a loved one across the state that will take them in, we'll buy them a bus ticket. And prevention, what is cool about it is so many times you always think you have to have all of this money and stuff like that. And a recent story we had a gentleman and that met us out on street outreach, and we have showers, and we had haircuts, and this individual got a haircut and cleaned up, and he looked at us, he said, I feel like my mother's son again.
Wow.
He said, can I call my mom? And we said, you can't. He hasn't talked to his mom for a couple of years because of the shame he felt. And his mom cried. And within a couple hours, we got him on a bus to go back and live with his mom. So, it's very important. Again, so we have also that street outreach program that I talked about. So those are my programs in Council Bluffs. The cool part is, and why I always want to lead that we were founded, I did not mention, and our founder yelled at me a couple times, that he was a service-connected disabled Marine. So Marine. I always have to put that there. Okay. But, him having the roots in that, in 2009, Nebraska was coined as a state that wasn't providing adequate care to veterans experiencing homelessness. And so a congressman at the time knew of our founder and knew of his passion for helping people experiencing homelessness and being a veteran. And so we applied that year for a large capital grant to build a facility to really cater towards veterans experiencing homelessness. And we got awarded the largest grant that year. So,
wow.
Yep. So we were able to build our campus, which is located in Omaha, so right off of 18th and Cumming. And so that opened in 2012. And so it's a statistic I don't like, but every night between Council Bluffs and Lincoln, there's about 120 veterans experiencing homelessness, which blows my mind in 2024 that we still have the words veteran and homelessness in the same sentence. Yep. We should not.
I agree.
But out of the 120, I'm proud to say I have up to 60 of them on my campus. So, so we have 4 different programs. We have non-congregate shelter. So instead of having our veterans in great facilities like Sienna Francis House, My Shelter, where it's more of a bunk style, they get to be in an apartment with one other veteran.
Nice.
And so they could stay up there for 6 months. They don't pay a dime. We have transitional living where it's, again, low demand, kind of like low barrier. We just take the veterans. And I just got re-awarded. I'm one of 14 programs. I'm so proud of this in the whole entire United States that has what's called a special needs program. And so we work with the veterans that have chronic mental health issues that haven't been successful in any other program. And so, there's only 14 awards of those. And I just got re-awarded that. So we have that. And then we have permanent supportive housing. So we do a lot for veterans. So those are our 2 campuses.
Wow. And over state borders. So you're Omaha and then into Council Bluffs. You threw some stats out there.
Yeah.
Do you have any more interesting stats? I mean, so far I've been kind of blown away. I'm aware of the poverty and the homelessness, and people and I think you said this earlier, people think of the guy under the bridge and everything, but you don't see it as obviously as you would in California or even Colorado. And so I love seeing organizations that see beyond that. Yeah. Right. Because you don't necessarily see it like we do in other areas. So what are some stats? Yeah. So our job is, and I take it very seriously because I'm from this community, my kids go to the parks. And I think one thing we could all agree on is that parks should be meant for recreation and families and not having human beings live there. Yeah. But we have to do something about it. And so many times we blame the person and not the system. So where we're at in the United States right now, homelessness increased in 2023, 12% last year. That is the biggest increase that we have tracked as a nation since we started tracking this data over 20 years ago. That's the highest increase. Unfortunately,
veteran homelessness increased by 7%. And everybody's like, well, why? Mental health and substance abuse. Well, we got to boil it down. And so, like I said, I love data and stats, and to know why are we seeing an increase in homelessness? Now, we're not at the point of other communities, but why are they there? And so a lot of times I heard a professor last year talk about it, and he says communities have to look for the right things, because if they're just looking at addiction or mental health, the reality is you can't use those as your two indicators, because there's a lot of people with addiction or mental health that are housed. What you have to use as an indicator is your rental vacancy rate. Because if we use addiction, we would know, like West Virginia, it has the highest rate of addiction per capita in the whole entire United States.
Wow.
It has one of the lowest rates of homelessness.
That's crazy.
Why is that? They have access to housing, and they have access to affordable housing. So any community that has a less than 8% rental vacancy rate, you're going to be in trouble. If you get below 5%, you're in big trouble. And I happened to be with the chief of staff for Council Bluffs at this meeting. I'm like, what's Council Bluffs in Omaha?
Yeah.
We're at 2% right now.
What?
2% rental vacancy rate. And so the problem is, during the pandemic, what ended up happening was the government did an amazing thing. They put a rental moratorium up because we didn't need people to become homeless, because who would that affect? That would generally affect our lower earners, the people that worked at our hotels, hospitality, places we weren't going out and can't work from home.
Right.
So they said, we're going to do a rental moratorium. They did another amazing thing and said, well, landlords aren't getting off the hook. So we're going to give billions upon billions of dollars to landlords so that they get assistance too. Where they missed the mark is a lot of that money was disseminated straight to the tenant and not to the landlord. And so I always say, when you live in poverty or even stressful things, you live in silos of today. Mm-hmm. You lose a loved one. How do I get through it today? You can't pay your bills and you don't have enough money and the collection's coming for your car and all of these things. How do I get through it today? So they're now getting a check for $4,500 and your car's going to get repossessed because you haven't been working and you can't get evicted. So a lot of that money didn't go straight to the landlord. And then we also had this other phenomenon going on where you could get low interest rates at 2%.
Yep, that did happen.
Yep. So 1 out of every 2 mom and pop landlords in the United States sold. They got out because now they could sell their, investment properties and make a lot more money than and who came up and bottom up? Who came up and bottom up? Corporations.
Yeah. Ohio.
Was
a
Ohio
huge one. Yep.
Coming to Council Bluffs in Omaha. And I know you're going to be surprised, Brandon, but they don't care about our communities like we do.
I'm not surprised.
Yep. And so they started implementing things. So rents went up about 40% on average in Omaha and Council Bluffs. 40%. And now they're doing background checks on your credit, on your rental history, on your criminal history. And now, since there's no movement in the housing thing, they get to be really selective of who they're putting in. So our individuals that have fixed incomes are individuals that might have had an eviction. And that's something I'm working on is legislation. Did you know if you have an eviction on your record, it stays on it forever?
Ever?
Ever. It does not come off.
Don't drug addiction?
It does, yeah.
Come on,
criminal
right?
does, yeah.
Wow.
Foreclosures do. If you have, driving records, it goes off. Evictions do not. And let's say that you had an eviction filed for you in the court system, but you came to New Visions and I paid it. It's still going to be on there, but you'll have to look deeper to see that it was paid.
Wow.
And so that's huge when these corporations come and systematize everything. Yeah. And you're just out. And now they're charging rental application fees of up to $50 and $100. So like I said, I love it when you're like, let's talk data and facts.
Yeah.
This is why we're seeing an increase. So we have to be careful as a community that we don't look at people on the streets or in hardships and say, you failed. Mm-hmm. Because the reality is there is a system fail right now. And so, and also, nobody looks at their son and daughter when they're born and said, what would be amazing if you were homeless?
Yeah.
And I've talked to thousands of people. And generally when I start speeches, I'm like, what did you want to be, to adults when you were in 2nd grade? And I get a lot of things. I've talked to kids and one of them wanted to be a penguin. I'm like, hey, judgment free. It's 2024, but nobody has ever told me they wanted to be homeless or struggle with mental health or addiction. That is not something, a path. But then we tell ourselves these narratives that these people want to be homeless, and that's a dangerous thing to say if we're leaders, because if we think that, then that releases us any responsibility to do anything about it. because it's like, well, there's nothing I could do because they're choosing this lifestyle. And the reality is they've lost a lot of hope. And so that's our job as New Visions, to give them hope back and be like, there's a whole community of people like Core Bank and their employees that care about you. They've never met you guys, whatnot, but they're in your corner because you're part of our community. And if one of us is failing, our whole community is not succeeding.
So what are some ways that you do meet the local needs?
Yeah. So our mission statement, and we just redid this a couple of years ago, and I was very intentional when I did it. You know, New Vision's mission is to provide help, hope, and opportunities. And I did it in those 3 ways. And that's to our neighbors experiencing hunger and homelessness in the Council Bluffs, Omaha area. And help is just through like our food security programs. You know, sometimes people just need help. They just need a hot meal.
Yeah.
They need somewhere safe to go. They need a clean pair of socks. We do a Christmas celebration for 5,000 people in Council Bluffs and Omaha. You know, the mom needs to know that I could continue paying my rent and I don't have to sacrifice my kids waking up and not having a gift to open. So they just need help. You know, a lot of times, like I changed even my intake process. If you haven't ate, you don't know where you're going to go. You walk into my shelter and I tell you, oh, unfortunately, like I run over capacity for that. I only have 64 beds in my men's shelter and I sleep over 100 men a night. So they get mats, you know, so I tell them, I don't even have beds for you. I got a mat. You know, they come in high anxiety, high fear, high guilt. And then I'm going to sit down and ask you if you have HIV or AIDS. It makes no sense. And so they just need a meal and a shower. So we changed that whole process. So helping is meeting their initial needs. And then they need hope. They need to know that their tomorrow could be better than today. They need to know that life's not, I tell my individuals, I say all the time, like, life's not a 9-inning game. No. We play till we win. I said, as long as you get up and swing your bat, I said, I can't do it for you, but I could be in the dugout. You know, so I got to give them hope to swing the bat again. But I can't, you know, give them a meal and give them hope and say, have a great day.
Right.
You know, and so this is where Core financial contribution goes, is they need opportunities. They need opportunities. And again, a systematized world where we just now do a lot of, you know, before interviews, we have AI that goes through candidates like, this would be a good one. Yeah. This would not. You know, so I'm so proud that 76% of my team are veterans, have lived expertise, are from the BIPOC community. And so we are actually giving them opportunities to go back. And so the gift that you guys gave us was through our work training program. So I took over permanent leadership in 2021, and I was in a meeting late 2022 because, again, I would say control the controllables, and I can't control the housing market out there, but I can control what the individuals are doing when they're in my facility. And so I didn't have a classroom. Our old boardroom was taken over by my street outreach team, so I had nowhere to do anything with these individuals. So I was on a campaign, and I needed about $40,000 more to raise a classroom, so I can start having groups and, you know, giving some of these. And Iowa Western Community College in Council Bluffs, I was at a meeting, and they said, we want the non-traditional students. We're going after them. And I went, woo! I did exactly that. And I said, come down to my campus. They're full. I'm like, the reality, I have people that will never step foot onto your campus. Yeah. But they would benefit. They have so many soft skills. They've been doing mechanics. They've been doing welding. They've been doing all of these things. But when they don't even have a locker, they're not going to take their whole belongings and truck it up to the college campus with 20-year-olds. And I'm so proud of Iowa Western. They said, okay, so they came down, and I was about $40,000 short on raising money for the classroom. I'm like, okay, imagine this. I said, do you have $40,000? And it was funny. The head executive director of their work training program said, me personally, I'm like, all right. And he's like, well, I don't know. I'm like, no, Iowa Western, yeah. And I said, we'll build it and we'll put, you know, a plaque that this was, you know, made possible at Iowa Western and another sponsor. And I said, then you could bring those classes down here. You could bring the high set, which generally GED classes, down here. You could bring them all down here while they're here. And I said, we could change how we do things. And he went back and he came back and he gave us $40,000. Yes. And then we started talking about our first classes that we were going to do. And I'm like, well, we need ones that's high earner, you know, that will make a livable wage for the gentleman in my vein, and that don't look big into criminal history or backgrounds. And so welding. So they had a 12-week welding class. And I'm like, that's too long. I said, when you don't even know if you're going to get a mat here, And then so we negotiated because it was only a couple hours a week when it was 12 weeks. And we're like 6 weeks. I'm like, can we do it in 3? We've done it in less than 2 weeks.
Wow.
From the time the Iowa Western comes down, they interview the individuals. They do all their pre-testing there. They have a welding facility off campus. So we drive them there every day and drive them back. And then they give them PEs, and then they also set them up with interviews. So we just finished last week our 7th cohort of that. So what you guys are helping us do is we don't have a lot of computers, so we bought some computers for the classroom so that they kind of could come in and do resumes on there. A lot of places you can't go into Walmart and give an application, a paper application. Everything's apply online.
Nowadays, yep.
So you guys are helping us apply online. We're doing aptitude testing. Because we do what? Aptitude testing in 10th grade?
Yeah.
Like I thought I was going to marry the head singer of New Kids on the Block in 10th grade. That was my plan.
I got put in a special reading program because I was told it wasn't graded.
Yeah.
And so I was like, okay, I can do this.
Yeah, but we tell people in 10th grade, this is what you should do. And it's like, so this new aptitude program we're working, it's not like answer A, B, or C. It has puzzles and stuff like that. And how does your brain work? And what do you enjoy doing? And then it's cool because then it breaks it down from like your creativity mind and then your skill set. And then it brings up jobs in our area that they might be able to do. That's awesome. So your guys' grant allowed us to purchase some new computers so that, we could do more than just 1 or 2 gentlemen at a time when we're doing these courses and classes.
Wow. Well, I'm glad that our funds have gone to something so effective because, again, I think it goes back to the help piece, an opportunity. It's not a meal, although you provide many meals, but it's beyond that.
Yes.
And a lot of the organizations that I see, people come out and usually either get involved themselves in the organization or are more likely to start something or lead others to the same. It is because it was more support than just the food, but that's a great start. It is.
It starts somewhere.
Yep.
And I've been doing this for 20 years, and I have paid people's rents. I've gotten them mental health help. I've given, we serve 180,000 meals out of just our Council Bluffs location, 50,000 prepared meals out of our veterans. Then we serve another 15,000 people from our food giveaways, distributions. We have a food truck. So we went back. I got a food truck 2 years ago. Yeah, we went back to our roots. Unfortunately, you hit a couple stuff in parking lot and your staff won't let you drive it. So
so you don't get to drive it.
I don't get to drive it. Anymore. One day, I'm hoping, if you ever see Brandy with a smile on her face driving down there, just get out of the way. So we serve about 20,000 people a year through our programs. And some of them are just the light touches where they come through and get a food pantry box. Some of them are deep down in our veterans program where we have mental health counselors, substance abuse counselors, where we're taking a deep dive into it. And so through the spectrum of it. But when I see true change in people is when they get a champion. Is when they know, and for so long they believe that they didn't matter and that they're just, I hate using words like hobo or bum or tweaker, because for every one negative thing somebody is told about themselves, you have to tell 10 positives to
offset that.
Wow. Yep. And so when we treat this population that they're less than, and if we know anything about history, when we treat a whole population that they're less than human, whether they're race, sexuality, anything like that, it's never good.
Nope.
It is never good. But when we uplift them and say, you are seen and heard and we love you and we respect you, that's when people start working in their brilliance. So that champion piece is huge. And then the opportunities, because we do that a lot. We live in a country where it's like, fresh starts. But we have to do it. We have to be able to say, we know you've missed it before, but that doesn't define who you are. That's something, I never say homeless people either, because they're not. They're people experiencing homelessness.
Exactly. Yeah.
But that is Ted. Ted served our country. Ted is pretty darn awesome. Ted was actually a chess master, and won awards for it, But then Ted's mental health got really bad, and he went through a divorce, and he gave up on himself. Ted is not homeless. Mm-hmm. Ted is a veteran and he has a name, so, and just again, so many times we think we have to have all these things. And one of the why stories I have is I was walking through our dining hall one day. We get about 500 people's mail at our Council Bluffs location, because when people are experiencing homelessness or they're staying with a friend or whatnot, they need a mailing address. So we get it. And so I like to, because if I see something and hear somebody's name, I'll remember it. Like if you just tell me your name, sometimes hard, but if I see it written down or an email and then I meet you, it's easier. So I like to work the front desk sometimes so I know whose name it is, you know. And so I got this individual mail, and a couple of weeks later I seen him in the dining hall, and his nonverbals, you could tell he was just going through it. And I stopped. I said, "Hey, Steve, how are you today?" And he looked up at me. He's like, "You know my name?" I said, "If it's Steve, I think I'm doing okay." And he's like, "It is." And I said, "Well, I'm Brandy." He's like, "I know." And I said, "Well, if you need anything, I'm just right back there." And he's like, "Okay." And I'm like, "Seriously, come see me if you need anything." And well, a couple of weeks later, he came in, and just physically, he looked completely different.
Wow.
And he was leaving the shelter. He reunited with a family member, got a job, and I get a call, and it's like, "Hey, Steve's here to meet with you." I'm like, "Okay." So I went up there. I'm like, "Steve, you're looking good, my friend." And he's like, "Brandy, I just want to thank you." He's like, "When you stopped and said my name," he's like, "I was thinking of all the ways I could kill myself, that my life didn't matter." And he said, "You reminded me that I have a name."
Wow.
Woo, it gets me still to this day. And so just the small things sometimes. It's just giving that human dignity point back to them.
Well, I mean, if you don't want to support the organization after that, I can't imagine it. But do you have any fundraisers? Do you have any events coming up?
Yeah, I'm so excited. Actually, tomorrow we're having our first ever veterans fundraiser.
Congrats.
I know. Pretty exciting. I spent most of my career working on the Council Bluffs side. So when I took over on the Omaha side, we didn't do a good job of telling our story, that we serve all of the, I mean, last year we served over 250 veterans, you know, and we did not tell our story. So that was very important to me. So we're having our first ever at Blue Sky Patio. So it's going to be a mini
ball, roller.
Yes. It's in the middle of the day. It's from 11 to 1:30. So we're having that fundraiser. It's been really awesome to see the support we're getting and new support from new agencies. Because once they hear about it, they're like, "We just didn't know," you know, so we're excited about that. And that's going to help us. So what the future of New Visions is, you know, during my first couple of years, I really took time to talk to the people I serve, because you can't have conversations about them without them.
Right.
You know, like I just met you, Brandon. Cool dude.
Thanks.
But in 5 minutes, I can't tell you how to solve your life problems.
My wife can't do it after 14 years either. Yeah, weird, huh?
I always say control the controllables, you know, and a lot of times but they know what they want. And so talking to our veterans, I talk to them because majority of our programs are transitional living. We do have 14 units of permanent supportive. Okay. And we opened in 2012 with 14 units. And I think I have 7 of those veterans still on campus. So there's not a lot of movement there. Right. So the other majority of veterans that come through are in our transitional. So they could stay anywhere between 6 months and 2 years. But ultimately, the goal is to get them back into permanent safe housing. So talking to them, I'm like, what do you guys want? Do you want to go into home ownership? Do you want to go into just scattered sites back in the community? Do you like the site-based, veterans only? And over 80% said they like the site-based, veterans only. The second thing they told me they liked is the food. You know, it was heartbreaking. I had a 72-year-old veteran said, "Brandy, when I was living in my own apartment, I couldn't afford food. I was eating crackers and ketchup." Wow. You know, so we provide 3 meals a day. But nobody really likes eating dinner alone every night by themselves. So we have a meal site. So a lot of the veterans come out of their apartments for that community. Okay. And the third thing they said is the location. They would want somewhere with more greenery and space. And so I started kind of talking to the community, looking for at community needs, data. The sad part about it with veterans experiencing homelessness, so over 55% of veterans in the United States are aging. They're in the senior population, you know, and so they served their country. They did all of these things, and now they're retiring on a pension of $1,400 a month, and rent for 1-bedroom apartments $15. Yeah. So we started looking at it and looking at data, and unfortunately, in the next 10 years, homelessness among aging veterans is supposed to triple. Because a lot of times, too, they can't afford it. There's not handicap accessible. They still want to be, you know, autonomous, but they need extra support. They need the, you know, places to age in place, and also to say die in dignity.
Right.
We had 6 veterans that died on the streets last year. That is not okay.
No.
That is not okay. So we are actually building. We got land off of 93rd and Blondo, and so we're building 48 units for senior housing for veterans. So again, in response to it. So this fundraiser is helping out. We're just in, like I said, we're applying for public dollars right now, but we have some foundations that's already going in, and to go back to that mission of, really making sure the words veteran and homeless is in the same sentence, and especially our senior veterans that live their whole life to only turn around and not being able to afford the necessities and have to eat crackers and ketchup. That broke my heart. The next day I'm like, y'all want a pizza party? What do you want? Like, Joel was eating crackers and ketchup. We're going to make sure. So we do feed them well at New Visions. I do have to say that.
Wow. Amazing. Amazing of all the things you've done with the organization, what the organization does. Every story you share, I'm just seeing like, another building, another campus and all of that. So I think you're doing a phenomenal job progressing with this organization, and you definitely have expressed the heart and the passion that you have for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Well, any final thoughts for the listeners?
I just want to thank you guys. We could not do this. Every single towel I hand out, every single time I pay a deposit for a veteran to get into housing or give a gift to a family or stop an eviction, it's because of you guys. It's because of the community. And I always say, look for the good. There's so much more good in this world. There is so much more that brings us together than divide us. And so I always say, a lot of times we have so much we don't have control about, but what do you? And so thank you. You had a decision to make if you'd invest into New Visions. And I could tell you it was a good one, and that we're going to see results and have impact because of you guys. So thank you, and continue to be awesome. Really, really awesome, except for Adam, because he's not here.
Adam's on the edits. We gave him a shout out. And he said he might have been here.
Yeah.
And you can't edit this out now, Adam, because that would interrupt Brandy's beautiful closing there.
I know.
And for more information on the Core Experience podcast, you can go to corebank.com/podcast, or you can always email us at coreexperience@corebank.com, and we will do our best to touch on any topics or subjects that you would like us to bring here onto the podcast. Brandy, thank you so much. Your stories, your inspiration. This has been a really fun one to record.
Awesome. Thank you.
And for everybody else, we'll talk to you on a future podcast.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Core Experience, your connection to community, business, and the people who make it all happen. For more details, go to corebank.com/podcast or email coreexperience@corebank.com. Brought to you by Core Bank, member FDIC.